For thousands of years, people have spoken of a lost world, a mighty kingdom of wealth and power ruled by kings said to be descended from gods. A city of golden temples, glittering walls, and great fleets that sailed across the seas. And then, in a single day and night of disaster, it vanished beneath the waves. Its name was Atlantis. The tale comes to us from the Greek philosopher Plato, writing over 2,000 years ago. He described an island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, larger than any known land, filled with riches, knowledge and ambition. Its people were strong, its cities magnificent, its temples unmatched. But greatness breeds pride. In Plato's story, the Atlanteans turned from wisdom to greed, from harmony to conquest. And so the gods struck them down. The sea swallowed Atlantis, leaving behind no trace, only legend. Since then, Atlantis has haunted human imagination. Explorers searched the oceans. Scholars argued over maps. Dreamers placed it in every corner of the world, from the depths of the Atlantic to the sands of the Sahara. Was it real? Was it myth? Or was it a warning written as a tale? This is the story of Atlantis, the rise of a paradise, the fall of a kingdom, and the mystery that refuses to die. Every great mystery has a beginning. The mystery of Atlantis begins not with explorers or sailors, but with a philosopher. More than 2,000 years ago, in the bustling city of Athens, a man named Plato wrote down a story that would outlive empires, ignite imaginations, and haunt human history. It was the story of a city that vanished beneath the sea. Plato was no storyteller in the ordinary sense. He was a thinker, a seeker of wisdom, a man who used myths and parables to teach lessons. Yet in two of his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, he spoke of a place that seemed too detailed, too vivid to be pure invention. Atlantis, he wrote, lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a great island larger than Libya and Asia, minor combined, blessed with fertile fields, forests, and harbors. Its people were powerful, seafarers, rulers of an empire that stretched deep into the Mediterranean. But the power of Atlantis was not only in its ships or its soldiers. It was in its beauty, its wonder, its order. The island was shaped in ring circles of land and water, carved with canals and bridges. At its heart stood a shining temple to the god Poseidon, adorned in silver, gold, and ivory. Its palaces gleamed in the sun, its streets were filled with life. Its people enjoyed wealth and knowledge beyond imagination. To hear Plato tell it, Atlantis was no ordinary land. It was a kingdom touched by the divine. Poseidon himself, he said, had fathered the first kings of Atlantis. They built a civilization unlike any other. And yet perfection never lasts. As centuries passed, the Atlanteans grew restless. Their wealth bred arrogance, their strength turned to greed. They looked outward, seeking to conquer distant lands. Soon their empire stretched its hand toward Athens itself. But here the story shifts. For according to Plato, Athens, his beloved city, stood firm. The Athenians, though smaller and weaker, defeated the mighty Atlanteans, proving that virtue and discipline could triumph over corruption and excess. And then came the end. Plato wrote, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea, a catastrophe sudden and merciless. One moment Atlantis was the jewel of the world. The next, it was gone, swallowed by the ocean, leaving behind only legend. Was Plato recounting history? Or was he crafting allegory, a warning to his people about pride and downfall? We do not know. What we do know is this: his words lit a fire. From that moment on, Atlantis became more than a story. It became a question, an obsession, a dream. For over 2,000 years, people have searched for the truth. Was Atlantis real? If so, where did it stand? And if it was only myth, why does it feel so real even today? Thus the legend of Atlantis was born, a city of wonder, a city of pride, a city lost to the sea. Some say it was fact, others swear it was fiction. But one thing is certain, it is a story that refuses to die. If Atlantis existed, what kind of city was it? What made it so extraordinary that people still whisper its name across the centuries? Plato's description paints a world almost too magnificent to believe. Atlantis was not a single city, but a kingdom, a great island ringed by mountains and open to the sea. Its plains were wide and fertile, its rivers full, its climate gentle. It was a land where crops grew in abundance, where forests provided timber for mighty fleets, and where mines yielded precious metals. But the jewel of Atlantis was its capital. Imagine it a city built in perfect circles, a design that seemed both natural and divine. Rings of land and water, cut with canals wide enough for ships to pass. Bridges spanned. The ring streets bustled with traders, and the sea flowed directly into the heart of the city. At the very center, rising above all else, stood the great temple of Poseidon. Its walls shimmered with silver, its roof gleamed with ivory, its pinnacles were capped in pure gold. Statues of gods and kings towered over courtyards. Gardens bloomed in endless color. Even the walls themselves were said to be plated in shining metal, reflecting the sun so that the whole city glowed. The people of Atlantis, Plato wrote, were gifted not only in war, but in art, science, and engineering. They carved canals across their land, irrigated their fields with precision, and built ships that could sail across oceans. Their harbors were filled with vessels from every corner of their empire, carrying grain, metals, spices, and treasures. To many, Atlantis seemed a paradise, a city where prosperity flowed endlessly, where order and beauty ruled, where gods themselves had laid the foundation. But paradise can be deceiving. In Plato's tale, the Atlanteans were not content with what they had. Their wealth, once a blessing, became a curse. They sought more land, more power, more dominion. Their armies marched across the seas, their fleets conquered distant shores. Their eyes turned toward Greece itself, toward Athens, the rising power of the age. Here Plato draws a contrast. Athens, humble and virtuous, resisted the greed of Atlantis. The Athenians stood firm and defeated the invaders. In his telling, this was the triumph of virtue over corruption, of discipline over arrogance. And then came the fall. For the gods, angered by the Atlanteans' pride, sent disaster. Earthquakes shook the land. Floods swept the coasts. And in a single day and night, Atlantis was gone. The shining city, the golden temples, the great fleets, all swallowed by the sea, leaving nothing but memory. Plato's description ends abruptly, leaving us with fragments. No maps, no names of kings. Only glimpses of shining walls, of grand temples, of a city too perfect to last. And yet those glimpses are enough. Enough to stir the imagination, to keep dreamers searching, to make people ask, what if it was real? What if a city like this truly stood long ago, only to be lost to the waves? Atlantis, in Plato's vision, was both a paradise and a warning. A place of unimaginable wonder, undone by its own ambition. A kingdom blessed by the gods and destroyed by them. A city that reminds us of the fragility of greatness and the thin line between glory and ruin. The legend of Atlantis did not sink with Plato's words. In fact, his story was only the beginning. From the moment the tale was told, people began to wonder if such a place truly existed. Where could it be? And so across centuries, the search for Atlantis began. For the ancient Greeks, Plato's tale was puzzling. Some believed it was a moral lesson, not history. Others whispered that perhaps there was truth buried in the story. But as time passed, the legend faded, until the Renaissance, when Europe rediscovered the writings of Greece. The story of Atlantis returned like a spark to dry wood. This was an age of discovery, when explorers sailed into uncharted oceans. Columbus crossed the Atlantic and new lands were revealed. To many it seemed obvious, could the Americas be the lost lands of Atlantis? Had Plato's great island beyond the pillars been waiting all along across the western seas? In the 1600s and 1700s, mapmakers began sketching Atlantis onto their charts. Some placed it in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Others whispered of Caribbean islands, Cuba, Hispaniola, or the Bahamas as fragments of the drowned continent. But it was in the 19th century that Atlantis fever truly ignited. An American politician named Ignatius Donnelly published a book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Donnelly claimed that every great civilization, Egypt, Mesopotamia, even the Maya, owed its knowledge to Atlantis. He argued that Atlantis was the mother culture, the cradle of human progress destroyed in a great flood. His book sold widely, capturing imaginations across the world. Soon explorers and adventurers set out to find proof. In the Caribbean, divers pointed to the Bimini, rode a strange line of underwater stones in the Bahamas. Some claimed it was an ancient Atlantean highway. Others looked to South America, linking Atlantis to the legends of the Andes. Meanwhile, scholars turned their eyes closer to Greece, the volcanic island of Santorini, once home to the advanced Minoan civilization, had been destroyed by a massive eruption around 1600 BCE. The eruption left behind ruins buried in ash and a vast caldera where land had once been. Could this be the disaster Plato described, a city drowned by fire and sea? And still the theories multiplied. Some claimed Atlantis lay beneath the ice of Antarctica, hidden for millennia. Others pointed to the Sahara Desert, where the mysterious circular Rishat structure. The eye of the Sahara resembles Plato's rings of land and water. Each new theory kept the legend alive, even as evidence remained elusive. The oceans were searched, islands were mapped, ruins were studied, and yet no proof came. But perhaps that is why the legend endures. The mystery of Atlantis is not in its discovery, but in its pursuit. Every age has placed Atlantis where it wanted it to be, a mirror of its own hopes, fears, and dreams. And so from the pens of philosophers to the maps of explorers, from the books of dreamers to the those of adventurers, Atlantis has been searched for, imagined, and longed for. Whether real or not, it continues to haunt the edges of history, a city that refuses to stay buried. So what was Atlantis? Was it a real place, a memory of a disaster, or nothing more than a story spun by a philosopher? For 2,000 years, scholars, scientists, and dreamers have wrestled with the question, and each has found their own answer. To many historians, the truth is simple: Atlantis was never real. Plato, they argue, was not a historian, but a teacher. His tale was an allegory, a warning wrapped in myth. To him, Atlantis was not a city of stone and metal, but a mirror, a reflection of human pride, a symbol of what happens when power grows without virtue. The Athenians in his story stood for discipline, courage, and order. The Atlanteans represented greed and corruption. In this view, Atlantis was never meant to be searched for, it was meant to be learned from. But not all agree. Some believe Plato may have been inspired by real events distorted over time. The eruption of Thera, Santorini, around 1600 BCE, was one of the greatest natural disasters of the ancient world. A flourishing civilization, the Minoans, was shattered by fire ash and tidal waves. Cities were buried, islands collapsed into the sea. Could echoes of this catastrophe have reached Plato centuries later, reshaped into legend? Others point to floods, memories of seas rising at the end of the Ice Age, when coastlines vanished and whole lands were swallowed. To ancient people, such events would have felt like the gods themselves were tearing the world apart. Perhaps Atlantis is not one city, but the memory of many cities lost to the ocean over millennia. Then there are the dreamers, those who still search the oceans for ruins, who peer beneath the sands of the Sahara, who trace strange patterns on the ocean floor with satellites. For them, Atlantis is not a fable, but a possibility waiting to be uncovered. Every discovery of a lost city, from Pompeii to Troy, reminds us that myths sometimes carry truth. And so the hope for Atlantis endures. Science, however, has not been kind to the legend. Modern maps of the seafloor show no trace of a sunken continent in the Atlantic. Geology leaves no room for a vast landmass to vanish overnight. Archaeology has found no evidence of a mother civilization that spread knowledge to all others. And yet, the mystery refuses to die. Perhaps that is because Atlantis is more than a question of where. It is a question of why. Why do we long for a golden age lost to the waves? Why do we cling to the hope of hidden knowledge waiting to be rediscovered? Atlantis may never have existed in the way Plato described. It may have been allegory or memory or nothing at all. But myths have a power that facts cannot erase. They live because we need them, because they speak to something deeper within us. And so Atlantis remains half history, half dream, suspended between truth and legend. The waves closed over it, the temples crumbled, the golden walls faded into the deep. Atlantis was gone, or so the story goes, and yet here we are, more than 2,000 years later, still speaking its name. Why? Why does a city that may never have existed still capture us so powerfully? The answer lies not in the sea, but in the human heart. Atlantis is not only a lost city. It is a mirror, a dream, a warning. Every age has found in it something of itself. For the Renaissance explorers, Atlantis was possibility, the hope that new worlds lay waiting beyond the horizon. When Columbus crossed the ocean, many whispered that he might stumble upon Plato's island. For them, Atlantis was not just legend, but destiny. For the Victorians in the 19th century, Atlantis became proof of progress. Writers like Ignatius Donnelly declared it the mother civilization, a vanished culture that had spread knowledge to the world, to a people intoxicated by discovery and invention. The idea that we had lost and could rediscover a forgotten source of wisdom was irresistible. In the modern world, Atlantis has become something even greater, a canvas for imagination. It lives in novels, in films, in games, in myths, retold again and again. Sometimes it is a paradise shining with crystal towers and advanced technology. Sometimes it is a warning, a proud empire drowned by its own hubris. Always it is a story we cannot let go. But perhaps the true legacy of Atlantis is this: it reminds us of the fragility of civilizations. Every empire believes it will last forever, the Egyptians, the Romans, the Aztecs. And yet history shows us again and again all things fall. Atlantis, real or not, is the symbol of that fall, sudden, total, merciless. In a single day and night, as Plato wrote, all was lost. And still there is hope woven into the myth. For Atlantis is also the dream of hidden worlds of knowledge, buried but not gone, of secrets, waiting to rise again. To search for Atlantis is to search for more than ruins. It is to search for meaning, for the golden ages we imagine once were and perhaps could be again. Even today, the legacy of Atlantis lives in unexpected places. The Mexican flag bears the eagle and serpent of another prophecy, but its echoes remind us of Atlantis, how myths define nations. In science, oceanographers still explore the depths, and each discovery of an ancient city beneath the waves, like Heracleion in Egypt or Pavlopetri in Greece, makes us wonder if these were once forgotten. Could Atlantis have been real too? The myth also lingers in our warnings. As seas rise, as storms grow stronger, as cities stand vulnerable on the coasts, Atlantis becomes more than legend. It becomes prophecy. The story asks us, if the great city could fall in a day, what of our own cities, our own empires? Perhaps Atlantis never existed. Perhaps it was always only Plato's lesson, a tale of pride and ruin. But its endurance, its immortality, tells us something important. We do not keep the story alive because we need proof. We keep it alive because we need what it represents: the dream of greatness, the fear of downfall, and the eternal question of what lies hidden beyond the horizon. So Atlantis remains not on any map, not in any ruin, but in us. A story of paradise, of power, of punishment. A reminder that even the mightiest can fall. A promise that mysteries still wait in the deep. The sea may have taken Atlantis, but it could not drown the legend. For Atlantis is not just a city, it is an idea. And ideas never sink,